So you may know that Christianity evolved from Judaism. And there is a reason I'm bringing this up. So Judaism's main distinction from Christianity is that they believe that God is going to enter into human history in human form. And Christians believe that Jesus is and was that person who entered into human form, who was God. And the reason that is relevant is because the Christian Sabbath, the Christian day of worship, is an evolution from the Jewish people's day of Sabbath and rest. Now, the Jewish people's day of Sabbath and rest in Jewish tradition, Jewish calendars, they had their day of rest on the last day of the week, which was Saturday. And, or more specifically, it was Friday evening to Saturday evening. So they would work Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and then they would start their 24-hour period of rest. And this is based on the creation narrative in Genesis, where God works for 6 days and then rests on the seventh day. And whether these days are literal 24-hour periods or more poetic stretches of time, that's something you can check out our other video on how old is the earth. We're not talking about that here. But the point is, we see, in Genesis 2:2, the verse says, by the seventh day, God had finished the work he had been doing. And so on the seventh day, he rested from all his work. So that is where this day of rest comes from. That's why it's on the last day of the week. But it's not just something they do in honor of God. It is also something they do because it's built into their Jewish Mosaic law, which actually, here I can read it. It's book Exodus, chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. Says, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath day to the Lord your God. On it you shall not do any work, you or your son or your daughter, your male servant or your female servant, or your livestock, or the sojourner who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is within them, and rested on the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and made it holy. So this is actually part of the Jewish law. And let me see. And so this is how things are for many, many years. And then Jesus enters the scene. He lives his life. His life ends with crucifixion. He's crucified on a Friday. He fully dies. He's buried. And then on a Sunday, he bodily resurrects. And he doesn't just bodily resurrect and peace out. He instead sticks around and he spends the next 40 days talking to people, eating with people. He even at one time appears to a group of over 500 people. And these are people who saw him die. and so this is kind of what gave birth to the early Christian church. And the early Christian church wouldn't exist if people weren't convinced of the resurrection of Jesus. And then to honor the resurrection of Jesus, which happened on a Sunday, they shifted their day of rest, their day of worship, to Sunday. And have been doing that ever since. And we see this in examples pretty early on, like in the book of Acts, that's about, the establishment of the early church. We see Acts chapter 20, verse 7, it says, on the first day of the week, we came together to break bread. The first day of the week, that's a Sunday. And as I mentioned, since the early church, it's been Sunday ever since. And this is even formalized by the Roman Emperor Constantine about 300 years later. He makes a civil decree saying that Sunday is the day of rest now. And here we are today. So most Christians do still meet on Sundays, but I think it is important to say that this is an honor of Jesus' resurrection. This is not something that we have to be legalistic about, right? We see in the book of Colossians, chapter 2, verse 16 says, do not let anyone judge you by what you eat or drink, or with regard to a religious festival, a new moon celebration, or a Sabbath day. And then, in Mark chapter 2, verse 27, it says, Jesus is saying that the Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So we don't need to, have any arguments about what day it's supposed to be. That if you work on a Sunday, you're not, worse off for having a Sabbath, a day of worship on a different day. But I also think it's important to say that if you are a Christian, then you should have a Sabbath right? Jesus says also that he didn't come here to abolish the law, but to fulfill it. And then we do see in Hebrews chapter 10, verses 24 and 25, it says, "And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near." So we don't have to meet on a Sunday, but we should have some kind of regular practice of Sabbath, a rest, a spiritual renewal of Christian community. So my question to you is, do you Sabbath? What day do you do it on? How do you spend your day of rest? Like, what makes it meaningful to you? I'd love to see that in the comments. And if you have any questions about Christianity, go ahead and put those in the comments too, and I'll try to answer there or in a future video. And if you'd like to see future videos, then go ahead and subscribe, and I'll see you next week. Thank you so much. Bye.